I'm going to go over a bunch of great things to read and listen to here on my website, Educated in Law. I think if you go to the homepage, you'll see this link. On this page, there are 6 essays. They're all PDFs. There are a lot of citations to court cases that back it up, but they mention key points about like difference between federal and state citizen, or difference between United States and United States of America, driving versus traveling points. And I've got some of them open, and they're very bare bones, but they're very helpful. And I've got 3 of them open. Like, so this one, the first one was, did you know there are 2 citizens, right? And they bring up the slaughterhouse cases, which is key because it clearly says there's a state and federal citizen. They lost their case because they said the 14th Amendment protects them, and the Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't. It doesn't protect you. You're state citizens. 14th Amendment is about the federal citizens. So key point. And then this one is like, where do you think you are? Are you in the United States, or are you in the United States of America, or are you in a democracy, or are you in a republic? But down here, these interview recordings are very helpful. I have a download link, which I also find helpful, and I'll get to audio in a second. So this is my handout. It's like 50 pages. I think if you scroll, you'll see it, and you can also at the top download the PDF. You can see that's a PDF link. Love the name, nothing personal, right? Because we're not persons, we're people. But I sort of, go to the difference between person and people. Person is a business entity. That's why they ask for your ID entity. Okay, you don't have an identity. A business is a business entity. Entity. And then there's like, again, I draw on the other points that I previously mentioned, that state versus federal, and USA versus US, and driving versus traveling. So I cover a lot of those points. So it's good to get the same points from different people. That's a great way of figuring things out. Like when I'm learning a sort of software, I'll watch YouTube and LinkedIn learning videos from multiple people because they have different ways of explaining it. Next, here I've made available 2 lectures you might have heard by Richard McDonald. They're both on YouTube, but here's the audio files. And I'm providing the audio files because I think you should download the audio files and find a good audio file player. I like this one called like Smart Audio Book Player, but it's great. I can add bookmarks to things because these are long, and you just want to like quickly go to like, okay, where's that point about allodial title for land, or where's that point about the meridians, that's also land. Where's that point about that dueling statutes, one for persons and one for citizens. Here on this audio files, you could sort of, also the URLs are up top here, and I'll put them below the video, links to all these pages. What I have here is 2 famous videos by Richard McDonald. This is another one from Karl Lentz. Next, living in the private. Look at all these different pages. I actually have a PDF somewhere on my website that I made of this, in case you want to read it as a PDF. This one doesn't really work well on the mobile phone, but this makes the clear point that everything you think is real is just called in the public. What you think is real is actually you're an agent for a business that they created in their marketplace system called the legal system, and you're supposed to conduct all your affairs in that legal system. And they'll protect you and they'll help you. They have a policy, policy officers to help you in that legal system. But there's some costs as well. They got a pretty restrictive penal code, and they will tax you heavily for being in that system or for operating one of their franchises. So the alternative is to live in the private, and it's not as hard as you think. You just like don't use their person, and you got to you'll get these terms right. Like don't use the second birth certificate. I've got a video about that. This goes into it, talks like the difference between like with the autograph, the difference between a signature and an autograph. Like a signature is short for sign. And I have this joke, like where it says sign here, it's like, would you like a stop sign or a one-way sign? Whereas an autograph is by a man, a woman, or a woman, so it's like, and sometimes you can see down here it has a thumbprint. So this is a great example of like the words. You think that the only thing there is signature. Well, no, there isn't. That's the signature applies to their legal system. Like that's what they ask for. Why do they ask for a sign? Because a corporation or company can't do an autograph. An autograph is by a man or woman. They've taught you the only thing there is signature, but there isn't, and that applies to all of it. They have told you all of it. You can live. The point is you can live in the private, and this covers a lot of it. And it also talks about the genesis, the beginning of it. It just happens when you're born. They create a person. You're indoctrinated to act in the role of a legal person. This is it. This is really rich stuff. Like, there's another good book I found called The True History. You can also download the PDF, or you could get it on Amazon as a Kindle. When the slaves were freed, most states were willing to make them a state citizen. And I'm telling you, none of the northern ones either, like especially Delaware, which freed their slaves last. To the people that were enslaved, they gave them like a franchise. They gave them an artificial person franchise. That's what they gave them, as far as I'm concerned. He sort of makes this point here. This is something I read early in the process. Really funny book, really sort of sarcastic, or flip. Freedom is more than just 7-letter word. This is actually a PDF of it. It's a large file, so give it a second. It says, I don't care if it's legal or illegal. I care if it's lawful or unlawful. They have made you think that the only thing there is whether something's legal or illegal, and that's only within their system. Just like certain things are allowed on a college campus and certain things are not. But you can do those things off a college campus. There are rules that only apply to certain contexts. And legal and illegal applies to legal names, legal commercial entities, about what those commercial entities are allowed to do or not. But it doesn't apply to men or women unless they act as an agent to that person. I know this stuff is hard to get, but it's just all business. I mean, it's just like if you had a Burger King franchise or something. That franchise has to follow certain rules, but on the weekends you can sort of cook burgers the way you want. So anyway, this is a good book. This is the PDF. I recommend it. Again, it's like every author has a different way of explaining things. And I can tell you, Veronica's got her own way. It's very fun. Back to Richard McDonald. He's the one that gave those 2 talks with the audio files. He also has a manual. And this is a great story because somebody actually attended his lectures back 20 years ago and got in touch with me and sent me these manuals, like in a box. And I scanned the first one, the manual. The other one, probably I don't need to scan. The other 4, but Richard was big on saying he would, if you bought his program, he gave you the manual, and then he also gave you 4 binders of cases and law, like copies of law dictionaries, so you knew why what he was saying was true. He always says, like, don't believe me, like, read the law. And again, that's the point of this whole video, is you have to read and reread, and that's what Richard said. He's like, don't read the things with big pictures. And they're like, what does that mean? It's like, well, anything that's not a law book, don't read it. There's no time. There's no time. You gotta, and there's a big payoff if you do it. You realize you're not liable for the income tax, for example, which is really an excise tax on corporations, and persons are corporations. Anyway, so it's worthwhile. Anyway, so I recommend downloading the PDF. Here's a quick table of contents, but so you can see what's in the PDF, but there's also a table of contents. Also, if you want to send Bitcoin to the man who sent it to me, who purchased this, he spent a lot of money on this a while ago, so you could use this to send him some Bitcoin. A popular page on my website, if you go to like popular Yusuf's 10, this is like the most popular page on my website, because this guy Yusuf, he's got a radio show, very smart man. I listened to him earlier in the process, or my edification or journey, and these are his like top recommendations, and I just sort of like put them together like an editor and said, okay, here's the web version and here's PDF version. So it's pretty handy. I like the paper hours one, and they're a little hard to read, but they're worthwhile. And again, I need to probably go back to a lot of these. I haven't read all of them, but these are his recommendations, and he's a smart man. So you can also do a zip file to download all of them, or I think I created one PDF of all of them. Again, just a link. This is another link to, this is True History PDF. So this page is pretty helpful, because it actually links to a lot of things that I've said, but it also links to more. Go to Cracking the Code. So Cracking the Code deals with the excise tax. What's the excise tax? Oh, you think it's called the income tax. No, it's a corporate excise tax. There's an excise tax on anything related to, anytime you make money off anything like related to federal operation. If you drill on federal land, you have to make a return of part of your gains. So if you work for Burger King, that's not an oil rig. That's not oil land or federal land. Like, that's a private business. So that is not a federally connected activity. Let me just point out, I disagree with the final recommendation of this author in terms of, he says you should like file, quote unquote, the 1040. I disagree with that. Like if you do a federally connected activity, you should use the 1040 NR, which is for non-resident aliens. But well, actually, if you work for the government, you probably could use the 10. I don't know, maybe the 10 anyway. But the point of reading Cracking the Code is to learn how to read the code. Now he focuses on Title 26, which is the income tax, but he teaches you how to read the code. This is a smart man who wrote this. I mean, he's so smart, and sometimes the way he lays it out is a little like he's got complex sentences because he's so smart and he could follow what's going on in his own sentences, but I sometimes had to read them a couple of times. But he is very worthwhile. This is mandatory. You have to learn to read the code, and you have to learn, an even more important point is to read the definitions in the code. Richard McDonald also makes that point. If you go to the definitions of the code, you will find the truth. And the truth is most of their stuff only applies to specific entities. It applies to their legal persons, or applies to federal citizens, or it applies to the United States, which is really the territories. This book, Cracking the Code, teaches you how to read the code, teaches you how to read the definitions. And once you can read the code, you can see that I have sort of some local codes, or the statutes about mandatory schooling. If you read the definitions, they'll say they only apply to persons, and then they define persons as business entities. A 1,000-page code about mandatory schooling, and you only need to read one page, which is the definitions. And you need to know what you're reading and not read between the lines. No, don't make up stuff. Just read it plainly, because that's it. They'll also say, oh, but this really means. No, it doesn't. Doesn't. It only means what it says it means right here on the page. He has made this book free. I think I've linked to all the sort of chapters. It might be a little hard to read because each one's a sort of image. So, and then lastly, I just have this page on the income, what's the excise tax, right? It's not income tax, it's an excise tax on federally connected activity. So I sort of have a summary of it. Yeah, I mean, this is serious stuff. I mean, if you mess this up, they're going to get you. But if you know your stuff, if you know the definition of wage, if you know the definition of trade or business, if you know the definition of the United States, you're right. People say, like, oh, you don't pay taxes. Like, yeah, I don't pay French taxes. You know why? Because I'm not liable. Okay, I don't have federally connected activities. If I did, I would pay my tax. I would make a return, and I would file. Employees file things. Okay, but it doesn't apply to me. Okay, so why would I pay something that doesn't apply to me? Okay. So the true history, the book I also mentioned, that covers it a lot. So this is worth your while. I mean, you're forking over a lot of your money every year. You think you're paid wages, you're not. Okay. The word wage they define the word wage, and that is a red flag right there. Like, it's like they define the word table. Like, why are you defining the word table? Oh, because table in their code means something that has two wings and flies. Okay, so do you have any tables in your house, your home? That's kind of the gist of it. There's a lot of money at stake. So they've duped people since World War II. That's where things changed. But around World War II, they sort of introduced the victory tax and just got everyone confused, and everyone's been duped ever since. Again, just the main point of this video is to point out some of the key things to read, and that you should read them more than once, and some of the audio files you can download to listen to more than once, because this is like tough stuff. Start reading, rereading, and post questions below the video if you have questions about any of these things. And thanks.